On July 9th, 2019, Sam Salmon's dream of a new life in America was shattered when the Chinese Stenton Technology coffee bean dryer he was repairing suddenly and violently exploded, throwing Sam across the room into a wall, causing multiple injuries to virtually every part of his body. He had countless broken bones, skull fractures, and a brain injury. He had internal bleeding from his liver, a punctured lung, a broken vertebrae in his spine, a very severe broken right leg and foot. There was not a part of Sam's body that was not hurt in some way. The doctors gave Sam a 50-50 chance to live. And at 40 years old, 20 surgeries later, facing more than $2 million in medical bills and having to wear a special brace on his leg and the need to have medical care for the rest of his life, he needed the best of the best lawyers to hold someone accountable for an unsure future ahead. So he turned to one of Florida's best personal injury law firms, Clark Fountain, LaVista, Littky-Rubin, and Whitman. Known for successfully taking on impossible cases, getting amazing results to help poor, defenseless little people like himself to win a $30 million jury verdict. In this insider-exclusive Justice in America network TV special, Justice in America, Sam Salmon's story, our news team is on location in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, to meet with Sam and his amazing legal team of Julie Littky-Rubin and Shana Nogues to discuss all the extraordinary challenges and hurdles they successfully overcame to touch the hearts and souls of the jurors who awarded Sam a verdict of $30,497,723.08. Sam Salmon possessed the kind of immigrant story that people hold up to the light with pride and praise. Sam was a skilled hard worker who came to the United States to make a better life for his children. He wanted to help them get the education he never could. This case shows that simply because you are facing a foreign defendant who thinks no one will be able to collect from, that there are people willing to fight to see whether that is actually the case or not. Julie and Shana have earned reputations as unyielding trial lawyers who repeatedly represent individuals and families against big companies and the Goliaths of the world, and repeatedly win. And their amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide their clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. It is my great pleasure to introduce Julie Littky-Rubin and Shana Nogues. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Tell our audience a little bit about Julie. Tell our audience a little bit about your firm.
Our firm is a personal injury firm, but we are not what I would call a run-of-the-mill volume practice. We don't advertise on billboards or buses or anything like that. We represent those who are gravely injured, people who have nowhere to turn, who don't have the means to pay a lawyer. We take all of our cases on a contingency fee. We advance all of the costs, and in the insurance companies and the corporations that we have to fight, that can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's no case that we will stop until we see success. I mean, you don't win every case, but we do go toe-to-toe with the largest corporations in the world, and we have been pretty successful over the years.
Right, and today we are here to cover a case of Samuel Salmon, who I would say was very desperate in the sense that he had a very difficult case. When you sat around, all of you lawyers, and decided to take this case on, what struck you most about this case, Shana?
Sam came to us and he was catastrophically injured. He had all but lost his leg. And he had talked to some attorneys who had thought that this case was very complicated because the main defendant was a Chinese manufacturer and designer of a dryer oven that was imported into the United States.
And let me stop you right there because I want to elaborate on that. When you are a manufacturer in another country and you get a verdict against them, right? Sometimes it's impossible to collect, correct?
It can be impossible to collect. And we do have a verdict, as you mentioned, against this Chinese company, Sinton Technologies. And we will go all the way in collecting. We have hired a collections attorney. We are working with attorneys in China. We have a receiver appointed in the court, and we are working on seizing their assets to recover at least some or all of the money that Sam is owed.
So let's talk about this case. Give our audience the basic facts.
On July 9th, 2019, Sam Salmon was a handyman in a coffee factory, and he was in a room, just so happened to be in the room, with this brand new dryer oven that was being used for the first time to roast bourbon-soaked beans. And he was with a colleague, another handyman in the factory, and that person stepped out. Like a bomb, the machine exploded. There was no noise, there was no warning, and he just happened to be in the same room. When the machine exploded, he was thrown across the room, he hit a wall, and was immediately knocked unconscious with injuries throughout his body. He had a multitude of broken ribs, a punctured lung that required a trach, and one of the most significant injuries was a very catastrophic foot and ankle fracture. He has had 21 surgeries, and he was hospitalized for about 4 months. Some of the time he was in a coma. And from a legal perspective, we were able to look at his injuries and say, wow, something went really wrong here, and somebody is responsible for it. Obviously, Sam had nothing at all to do with what caused him to be so injured. And from a case perspective, we sat down and decided that we needed to find these people that are responsible and hold them accountable. We needed to find justice for Sam.
Now, when you started getting into the facts, Julie, you discovered something, as we mentioned. You had a main defendant, the manufacturer, right, in China. And when any law firm, and a lot of law firms wouldn't have taken this case on.
Absolutely correct. And not only was there a Chinese manufacturer, but we also had a lot of kind of complex legal issues that would often make a case unattractive to other attorneys. One of the issues was that Sam was working at this coffee company, and in Florida we have a very rigid workers' compensation law, so we were concerned about being able to pursue his employer as a company that was not his employer, and we were also concerned about, obviously, the Chinese manufacturer. And then, because Florida law allows for we call it a products liability law, our firm does a lot of that, where you can sue any entity in the chain of distribution of a product when it is defective upon arrival. We also had sued a company that kind of considered itself like more of a Federal Express shipping company. We considered it to be an importer. The law was unsettled on importers, and we had to fight the case on that front also.
And when you talk about unsettled, it's ambiguous.
It is ambiguous. There is a Florida standard jury instruction that says that you can sue an importer, but there's not really a lot of case law to say who or what an importer is.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. We do stories, as you know, all around the country. And in this state, this jurisdiction, there's the issue, and please address this, of there's an interesting word, working. Was Sam an employee? Was he an independent contractor? What's the difference as it applies to this case?
In this case specifically, the coffee factory was not only the end user of the imported dryer oven, but they were also, according to U.S. Customs, the named importer. So because of the chain of custody of the machine and them being named as an importer, eventually we felt that they needed to be named as a defendant in the case. But there is, as Julie mentioned, a very strict workers' compensation immunity law. So it's very difficult to get around if somebody is a statutory employer, meaning they exercised a certain amount of control over the person, there are appropriate documents in place, and they have paid workers' compensation. It's very difficult to sue them. So we had to look at this from different angles under the law to be able to pursue one of the possible importer entities.
And let's talk specifically about whether Sam was considered, because the defense was saying he was an employee, and you guys, your firm, was saying no, he was an independent contractor working for the day. What's the main benefit or not benefit of being either one?
So if you are an employee of an entity, to get around immunity, you have to be able to prove virtual certainty of an incident occurring, which means, and the law is a little complicated on this, but that means an almost exactly the same incident had to have occurred already for you to pursue that employer under the virtual certainty standard. If you are an independent contractor, there's no immunity. The employer entity, if you will, is not entitled to that immunity. And in this case, Sam was an independent contractor, but he was able to benefit from obtaining workers' comp payments, and workers' comp did cover his medical bills initially. So we were really threading the needle on independent contractor versus employee status.
How complicated is it this to explain to a jury?
Very. Actually, workers' comp immunity first is almost always brought in a motion for summary judgment, or a motion where a defendant asks the court to declare as a matter of law that there's no case, that they cannot be legally a defendant. So in the depositions that I took leading up to the defendant's motion for summary judgment, I had to focus a lot on establishing that Sam was independent, that he was not under the control of this entity that the law requires, and that he wasn't an employee under the definition of the statutory employee until after the explosion occurred.
So now both sides, the defendant, attorneys, as well as your law firm, are looking at the law as kind of nebulous, ambiguous, right? And so your strategy was to, please talk about high-low.
So typically a high-low agreement is something that's used in trial, while either towards the end of trial or while the jury's deliberating, both sides still see significant risk, so both sides agree to enter into a high-low agreement to mitigate their risk.
And explain that so the audience understands that.
Basically, in a high-low agreement, there's an opportunity to enter into a pre-verdict settlement that is determined ultimately by the jury's verdict. So if you're the plaintiff, you would possibly propose that if a jury comes back with a defense verdict, we still settle for this amount of money. So you waive an appeal and you have a defense verdict settlement. There could also be a threshold verdict. So if the jury comes back with a verdict of this number or less, our settlement value is X.
You're going to get some money regardless, right?
Exactly. You're going to settle the case regardless of the ultimate outcome.
Now, the reason that the other side enters into this agreement is because they're unsure of the outcome too.
They're unsure, and it caps their exposure.
Is this often used with law firms?
Fairly frequently used with law firms in trial, but in this particular case, with respect to the workers' comp issue and the possible employer defense, we did not have a trial. And while the motions for summary judgment were being briefed and while we were getting ready for the hearing, we'd come up with an idea that we could implement this high-low strategy based on the outcome of summary judgment. So we are unaware of this ever having been implemented before. And we wanted to make sure Sam had a positive outcome because of the unknowns with the Chinese manufacturer, who was the truly liable defendant, the most liable defendant. So we had entered into a high-low agreement based on the judge's ruling on the defendant's motion for summary judgment saying that they had workers' comp immunity.
One of the other complications was something that Sam did unknowingly. He had to pay his medical bills, right? So he applied for workers' comp, right? And the other side initially used that for their benefit, right? In saying that, see, he's really an employee, right? And therefore we're immune to being sued.
The law is ambiguous, whether or not you could be considered an employee that's receiving workers' comp, whether or not you passively or actively accept workers' compensation benefits. So there's a very good argument, a very strong position that if somebody doesn't know about the benefits and their medical bills are just getting paid, that they're not an employee and they were providing gratuitously benefits. But in this case, it came about that Sam had signed, unknowingly, but Sam had signed multiple petitions for workers' compensation benefits.
Right. Now there's a $30 million verdict, correct? What have you discovered about the manufacturer's presence in the United States about selling these machines? Do they have a lot of them in operation?
This manufacturer imports to specific buyers dryer ovens, industrial ovens all over the United States. And they have connections, although not specific to any state, they have multitude of connections to the United States. They also have a trademark in the United States. And our receiver is seizing imports, seizing their trademark, and also with China going overseas and attempting to seize their assets there.
Now, seizing their trademark, that's kind of interesting because that puts you in another jurisdiction, right? It puts you into federal court, correct? And it puts you in patent and trademark court, right? Where are you with that, by the way? And has that been done before?
The strategy is to seize these assets and force the company to buy them back to satisfy the judgment.
Smart. That's why we love your law firm. I mean, this is ingenious, right? Have you seen this done before?
I have not.
Wow.
We have not done it here before, but we're hoping that we'll be successful.
And at this point in time, has the Chinese manufacturer appealed the verdict or anything? No.
They have not, and they cannot at this point.
Because they didn't answer in time.
And they did not file a notice of appeal in time.
So when you guys do a lot of product defect cases, these are very interesting cases, aren't they? And you come up with novel ideas, again, like the Letterman case, like this trademark case, right?
Every case is different.
You put a lot of money and time into this. You could lose.
To be honest, I mean, we have lost. And there are not that many law firms that can afford to invest the kind of money that it takes to be successful on these cases, because big corporations, they'll say, look, we'll starve you out. You're not going to spend the kind of money that we have. But we are always willing to do that, and we have been successful enough to have the luxury to be able to have that kind of money so that no, we're not afraid of any case.
Yeah, and that's why I'm going to go to my last question. When viewers are watching this show, it is best to go to a law firm, not only that has been successful, you know, in getting big verdicts that their clients deserve, but also to go to someone who has the ability, financial ability, to lose a case, right? To lose a case. And my last question is, how do you pick the clients like Sam?
I think we start by who the client is. When Sam Salmon came to us, he is a genuine, honest, hardworking man. There is nothing that makes a better successful plaintiff's case than a good plaintiff. And in the Letterman case, you saw that. In the Malibu case, you saw that. So I'd say that's one of our top criterion. We know that every case is not going to be winnable, but we need to have a theory that we at least can pursue. And we contact our experts, and all of that costs money. And sometimes you get a report from an expert that says, this is not a case. You should not pursue it. We take a lot of cases, and sometimes we can't pursue them all the way because our theories aren't borne out by the expert opinion. But we have to always evaluate each case from a perspective of, can we win it, even if we aren't going to? If we don't really in our hearts believe we can win it, we usually don't take it at the outset.
And that's the last question to you, Shana. When you decide on representing someone, does it have to be a unanimous vote?
There are certain cases that we'll have a discussion about, a roundtable about as attorneys in this firm, and For example, if I or if Julie really believes in it and some of the other attorneys are skeptical, we'll support each other in taking the case and pursuing the case because of the belief in the case and that something went wrong, the belief in the client. One of the things I love the most about this business and this career is a lot of what we do is to make products safer for consumers. Dryer ovens, vehicles, boats. So if there's an opportunity that one or a few of us see that we feel strongly about, we support each other in taking on the case and pursuing that.
Your law firm did a remarkable job, and thank God for Sam, and thank God for you guys, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
And we have with us today your client, Sam Salmon. So let's bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Sam Salmon and Shana Nogues. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Sam, you have been to hell and back, haven't you?
Absolutely, yes.
Tell our audience a little bit about what happened that day from the beginning when you were in the coffee shop.
Well, I wake up in the morning and I get dressed, went to work with my coworker. His name is Sean. So we were moving things from one point to the next point. So Sean just leave me and said, Sam, give me a minute, I'll be back. So I would stand up right next to the coffee dryer. And Sean tell me that as he went through the door, he hear a loud explosion and the coffee dryer explode. Few days later, I find myself in the hospital, waked up wondering what happened.
So from the time the explosion happened, you were out of it, weren't you?
Yes, I was in coma for days. Then I wake up and I realized that I was hospitalized.
Now, you had been to this coffee shop several times before, right?
Yes.
You went there to help them sometimes working on their machines, right?
No, I went there. Sean is the one who take me there. So I used to work with Sean, do fix things like maintenance. So they went on a roadshow and bring back all the material that they bring from the roadshow and bring it. So me and Sean would put them back in their separate places. So there was one table there, and Sean said, Sam, don't move that table. I'm just gonna ask, where should we put this table? So that's when Sean stepped away and leave me at the machine, and the explosion just went off.
Shana, I understand that this machine had only been turned on one time before, something like that, correct?
That's correct. So the machine had been plugged in. They had tested it a couple days before Sam's incident to make sure that it would turn on. And then the following day, they put some trays in the machine, turned it on for a few minutes, made sure that the trays fit, that the machine was heating up, turned it off. And then the very first time they were using the machine, the dryer oven, to roast coffee beans is when it exploded just like a bomb into hundreds of pieces. And that's when Sam's incident happened. And it's very unfortunate that this, of course, happened and Sam was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
When you woke up in the hospital, you had no idea why you were there, right?
No.
And did a doctor come in and explain what your medical condition was?
Well, when I wake up, I realized that I've done some surgeries. My foot was broken, and my ribs was broken. Punched my lungs. That's why they put it straight.
Now, you're originally from Jamaica, correct? You came to this country because better life, right?
Exactly.
And how long had you been in the country before this happened?
I've been here since 2014, but I was living in New York, so I moved to Florida the 2018 in September, October.
Did it ever occur to you when people are gravely hurt, injured, that what happens next? Did you ever think about that?
Sometimes, yeah, because my injury every day, I keep on wondering what's going to be the outcome.
Yeah. So what were the doctors telling you?
When they were contemplating if they were to amputate my leg twice, but then they started to try their best to save my leg, where they go in my back, they take a muscle, they do skin graft, and try to, the best they could to try to save my leg.
Yeah. How long were you in the hospital?
The incident happened from July, the 9th of July, and I was back home in November.
In November. So about 4 months.
Yes, from the hospital to the rehab, I was back home.
Now your life has totally changed, right? You can't work anymore, right?
I still have to do like simple things wherein that's not what I used to do.
How did you end up with this law firm?
Well, I was in the hospital and a lady asked me, do you have a lawyer or something? And I said, no. And he said he could refer me to a lawyer. And he referred me to the lawyer. And then I think the case was, I don't know if it was too much for him or something. And then he find this nice lawyer lady, Shana, Clark's Foundation. And they're the one who come in and help me.
Shana, how long did it take to get to court on this case?
This incident happened back on July 9th, 2019, and we had our trial back in April of this year, 2023, so about 4 years.
Right. And during that time, what was going on legally?
We were focused on learning exactly what went wrong with the machine, proving up the defect, and identifying the appropriate defendants in the chain of commerce that manufactured, designed, and got the machine into the United States.
You guys did a great job, by the way. During this time, how long did it take you, once you got out of the hospital, how long did it take you to recover?
Well, up to this point, I'm not fully recovered, but I'm still going.
But you're able to walk okay now.
I'm still walking with a limp and I have to use a splint, where you call a foot brace, and they tell me that I have to use that for the rest of my life.
What motivated you to keep getting better?
Well, at one point, what was going through my mind is, what if I get my foot amputated first? But then I said, even if my foot was amputated, there's a way where I could still fulfill my dreams. And what really motivated me is, I have a family, kids, and I have to take care of them. So I have to keep pushing my best, even sometimes I wake, I don't want to go, but I have to.
You have responsibilities.
Yes.
And even though it hurts, you got to get up and go.
Exactly. I have my kids to take care of, my car payment, my rent, my family. So I have to go.
And you are working today, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Where do you work now?
I still work at the coffee factory, but what I used to do before, like I can't do it because I cannot move like that. So I'm just sitting down doing simple things.
Right. Because as you told me before the show, your family, some members of your family were killed the other night, right?
Just last night.
Yeah. And had you been in that situation, you might not be able to run as fast to get away.
Exactly. Yes. If I was in that situation and I hear a gunshot or something, I would just have to take my time, walk away. I couldn't run.
Mm-hmm. My condolences to you, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Wow. You know, that's why we're here today, because, you know, your law firm takes on cases that are unbelievable. We've done a couple of other shows in some of your cases, and you walk the talk. I want to thank both of you for being on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.